Well, welcome to a very special episode of Cars, Shops, and Collections. I want you to meet Brian. It's good to see you, buddy.
Likewise.
Dude, thanks for being out here, man. And Brian is the owner of this 1971 Datsun 510. This is a Brock Racing Enterprises official tribute car.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yep, it's an awesome car.
It's a fantastic car, man.
It's a riot to drive. Super low, super quick, but you know, it's a fun car.
This is like as close to the real deal as one could possibly get.
Yes,
official
sir.
Tribute car signed off by Peter Brock himself, right?
Yes, sir. Exactly. Yep.
There's so much history behind the BRE racing team, so much history behind this car. And instead of having, Brian, you kind of inherited the car from your father-in-law, right?
Well, it's my mother-in-law's car.
Mother-in-law's car.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's a family car. You
Yes,
inherit
sir.
it. So instead of having Brian explain the car, instead of having me explain the car, we're literally one block away from Peter Brock.
That's right.
And you have set it up where Peter is waiting for us to take a look at this tribute car.
Yes, sir.
The excitement, I'm like geeking out. Gene, how excited are you about this one?
Really excited.
Let's do this. This is gonna be a trip. This is gonna be an absolute trip. All right. See you over there?
All right.
Yes.
Officially met Peter before?
Yes. Yeah. When he signed the glove box, I met him, and I've seen him at the open house they had here at a car show,
Yeah.
as well as one out on the other side of town. Yes, sir.
Holy cow.
Yeah. It's a really cool store.
Oh my gosh.
You see some pictures of the 85 car too. Here she is here, driven by Bobby Allison himself.
This is a trip. I don't know why I always whisper in places like this. I feel like I need to whisper.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a museum.
Yeah, it really is. Dude, check out some of the posters as well. The book you put out a couple years ago. Oh, there it is.
It's like a little RC car, looks
Yeah.
like. All I see is 46. I wonder if he has 85.
Do you buy stuff? Oh, do you have the shoes?
No, I don't have
Oh
the shoes.
man, come on.
I got a couple of shirts, some
Gene, you gotta get the
polos.
shoes.
I bought the car cover from him.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, yeah, it's at the house. I keep it covered in the garage 24/7.
It's just it's automotive. Okay, now I'm just noticing the years.
Yeah.
Automotive history of his life.
Gail.
JC.
Hi, JC.
Hi, Gail. Nice to meet you. This is Gene over here with all the cameras and everything. How are you? Thanks for having us.
Oh, absolutely.
The shop here alone itself is pretty cool.
It's what we call a Peter Brock history wall.
Yeah, it really is.
Starts with his first car in '52, an MGTC, and then he got a 1946 Ford, which he chopped and channeled and put a Chevy engine in it. And he won the Oakland Roadster Show in his class twice by the time he was 18.
Okay.
So he just kind of started right out of the box. And then, of course, he went to GM.
Yes.
Sketched what became the '63 Corvette, and then Shelby American.
Is that one of his original sketches right there on the wall?
It is a copy of
Okay.
it. The original vellum is probably like this.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Uh huh.
Yeah. So, and then Shelby American goes to the doorway.
Okay.
Then BRE, and that's the Datsun.
The dot. Yeah. Uh huh.
And actually, for a few years, he did work with Hino and Toyota and Triumph, but then ultimately landed with the Datsuns. So.
This is like a moment right now. Mr. Brock, how are you? It's a pleasure. JC.
All right.
It's nice to meet you. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
This is you met Brian before, right?
How are you?
Yep. How are you, sir? Good.
And this is Gene behind the camera and everything.
Go on.
We're geeking out right now. We're not worthy. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
Glad you had the interest to come over and see what was going on.
Yeah, and then have you seen Brian's 510 before? I've heard.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. We want to know if we can show it to you again and maybe get your thoughts on it and do like a walk around. Would that be possible?
No, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Okay. you walk out and see a tribute like this, what goes through your mind when you see?
Well, the thing is that this particular car is a replica of Bobby Allison, who was a top NASCAR driver. And what we did with the team is we had several different cars like this. And that we'd always keep one car loose, what we called our star driver car. And so when we go to a new area, we take the top driver from that area and put him in the car so he could race against us. The main reason was that the local press would know that guy's name and would follow that car. So in the case here with Bobby Allison, who was a top NASCAR driver, one of the top 5 in the world at that time, to have him drive this car was sort of a step down from, here he is, he's a big national hero. And he comes down to this little series and drove this particular car, and he drove it very, very well. You know, obviously he's a great driver, but it was so unusual for Bobby to drive this particular car, and it was a very popular thing. So he drove for us a couple of times. So this is always, the 85 car has always been known as the Bobby Allison car. Yeah.
Did it start as 35 and you guys just made it an 8?
We did have a 35 car for a while and then changed it to 85, and the 35 car got changed. Let's see, I'm trying to remember which cars went where, but
That's why you just filled in.
So we did, just filled in, made it the 8. Yeah, okay, okay. When you built this, did you put any Corvette parts inside?
No. This was all, we had to invent most of our parts to develop the car, because of the whole series, American racing was considerably different than the way the factories supported racing in Europe. In Europe, the factories would build special parts for the cars so that when they were what they call homologated, they were approved by the sanctioning body. They could have all kinds of special, they could have twin double overhead cams and twin ignition and fuel injection and all kinds of factory support. In the United States, you had to take a production automobile and use those parts only. You could take any material off of it. For example, if you wanted a lighter flywheel, you could cut the flywheel down, but you couldn't put in a special flywheel or anything. So everything had to be developed out of a production car. That way, the series had a far more credibility because it was cars that you could buy and outfit there. So that was so popular with this particular series is that at the time that we came into the series, Alfa Romeo and BMW were the 2 factory teams, factory-backed teams in the United States. They weren't factory teams. There's a difference between factory-backed and factory. But they were pretty much ruling the whole thing. So we showed up with a car that was $3,500, built it up, and immediately were competitive. So this brought a whole bunch of young kids in because this was a car they could buy. If you wanted to go out and buy an Alfa Romeo or wanted to buy a BMW, you were going to pay 2 or 3 times what this car cost. And it was immediately competitive. So you'd get a good set of wheels on it, like it was that you could go out and buy a good set of wheels on it. And just build up the engine. We had a little, how to hop up the existing engine because you had to use the production engine. And we're immediately competitive with these 2 major names. So that brought Nissan really into the credibility of the American market. Prior to that point, Japanese cars had not really had any status in the United States. They were considered junk cars. And they were, because a lot of the early cars were simply copies of European cars that had already been come down. Whereas Mr. Katayama, who was the president of Nissan, realized that they would have to have an upgraded automobile. So he authorized a lot of neat things for the factory to build into the car. They had the engineering talent, but instead of building them just as cheap as they could, they began putting really good equipment and engineering in it. So for example, it has 4-wheel independent suspension on it. It has disc brakes in the front. It had an overhead cam engine in it. And so with all of these basic components underneath, you could take and modify that car within the existing rules and have a really competitive automobile. So the fact that young kids could get into this series and be competitive with the expensive European things really changed the whole look of American racing completely, you know. That was what was so important.
This was Brian's father-in-law's car.
Yes, right.
So do you know what inspired your father-in-law to get this car? He was just a fan of Peter's, a fan of Datsun, fans of...
Huge fan of Datsun, and the racing. Yeah, the whole history of everything behind Peter Brock, Just in love
But he
with
did
it.
it so right, you know, and it was such a beautifully done car. And it's one of our favorite customer cars that has been duplicated. And to have it here in town is great.
Isn't it a trip?
It's just wonderful to have the car here because it's such a beautiful car, and yet, you know, it's something you can drive on the street.
Yeah. When you're driving it, how many people?
A lot.
I mean, a lot of people stop you, right?
On my way here, I got waved by a couple people, stopped and grabbed gas when a couple people came up and took pictures of it. Yeah, it's a very likable car.
Yeah.
People love this
Drive
car.
down the road, everybody.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so well done.
Yeah.
It's every single detail. You have it nailed down. Why though? I'm maybe probably curious too, Brian. Why did you go all in on the 510? Why not the 240Z? Like, why was there so much emphasis on making the 510 this great race?
Very interesting. Well, it's two different classes completely.
Okay.
The 240Z ran in the SCCA's, what they call C production. And in that particular class, we were running against Triumph and we were running against Porsche, again, which were factory-backed teams, very, very strong teams. So they had ruled that class for quite a while. So we came in with the 240Z and were instantly competitive, won the national championship 2 years in a row with those cars. And the sales on that car just skyrocketed because it was a beautiful car, it drove well, and you could buy it relatively inexpensively. So I went to Mr. Katayama, the president, because he pretty much trusted whatever we wanted to do. And I told Mr. K, I said, you know, it's absolutely stupid for us to continue running Z cars. What you should do is let the privateers now turn over that and let me run your 510s in against the Alfa Romeo and BMW. He was shocked. He said, well, that's not any kind of a sports car at all. I said,
510, right?
I said, yeah. I said, well, that's the whole point. Let's get the whole youth market involved in this with this car, because you can buy the car and make it competitive. And that's what we did with it. And it completely changed the whole view of the American market on Japanese cars. Because for once, we had a car that was really competitive with the European cars and upgraded it. And with all that youth market coming in this, it just changed everything.
Brian, can you let's pop the hood and just take a look underneath the hood before we... So say, what's the expression, race them on Sunday?
Sell on Monday.
Sell on Monday. Well, growing up, my dad had a 280Z, and so the Datsun brand just brings back so many childhood memories. As Gina, your brother too, had a 510. What, can you educate us on what we're looking at here to the average viewer?
Well, again, there are certain things that were permitted in the class that you could change carburation. So we took the stock carburetors off and put on these Weber carburetors, and that really upped the horsepower. But other than that, it's a stock Datsun 1600 engine, but completely modified internally by removing all of the weight components, regrinding the cam, because the rules are you can take metal off, but you can't add metal. So for example, you could make a far more radical cam if you could weld material on it and regrind it, but you couldn't do that. So you had to work with the existing cam and regrind it to that standpoint. So by upping the compression on it, lightening the crankshaft, putting a good pan on it with good oil seals on it, and putting good carburetor on it, in the end, I think we're putting out about 180 horsepower, something like that out of it. Yeah.
Stock, you buy it new, 67 to 73 is when they made them.
Yeah.
You buy one stock at a dealership, you're about 100, probably just under 100 horsepower when you buy one.
110, something like that, yeah. So again, but just standard California hot rod techniques. put that into the Japanese cars and you made a real great car. And the fact is that the components in it were very high quality.
Okay.
So that's what made this car so successful.
So even on this tribute down to the engine here, it's great detail has been done on this tribute.
Yeah.
And before we wrap up, I want to take a look on the inside and just, as far as the actual racers that you had, your interior was different, you stripped parts out?
We had to run, this is a nice street GT car interior.
Yeah.
Now, as a race car, everything is stripped out of it, so primarily for fire safety, so that there's nothing that's going to catch fire if you crash the car. So you lighten the car, but you're only allowed to lighten down to a certain limit on the class, so that all the cars, and what was interesting on that is the frontal area on the cars and the weight of the cars is all about the same in that class. So that's what made that class so competitive. So when they were running, we're not talking about seconds difference, we're talking about tenths of a second.
Yeah.
So when you put a grid out there of sort of factory-supported BMWs and factory-supported Alfa Romeos and our factory-backed Datsuns, the first 5 to 6 cars out there on the grid are within a second of time, So the competition is really, so you had to have a really great driver. So we had John Morton was our #1 driver for the team. And of course we had guys like Bobby Allison come in and drive as well. But John Morton in this car was absolutely unbeatable.
And that's what you got signed?
Just won I'd say we won 80% of our races. And after 2 years, the factory just stopped supporting the BMWs and Alfa Romeos because they couldn't use the special parts that they used in Europe for the racing versions.
Oh, okay.
And they said, we can't come over and support a series that we got to watch what we're doing in Europe. That's where they're going to spend their money. So they quit, and that killed the series. So we ended up winning, I'd say, 80% of all the races, and that was the end of the series. We just eliminated everybody.
Destroyed all the competition?
We just destroyed all the competition, yeah.
Well,
and the fact that we did it with a $3,500 Japanese car was absolutely great.
It's a tribute to you and the genius that you have when it comes to cars.
Well, it's not the genius. It's California hot rodding. There's a culture here in Southern California that grew up in modifying cars from the early 1900s onward. Even before World War II, people were running up at the lakes and stuff like that. So all of this experience of having all of these manufacturers that could regrind cams, or could make special pistons for you, or a shop that could do exceptional balance work. So having all of that, those facilities at our disposal in Southern California to be able to use that knowledge and that equipment and specialty shops to develop a race car was the thing that made it really successful.
I will wrap up here, but just probably your thought too is, did you think when you built this back in the early 70s, 50 some years later, it's still going to have a cult following?
Hardly. And what's really interesting is that the series now is more popular than it was back in that time, because guys can buy these cars still. The price to go out and buy one of these now is just $20,000, $30,000.
Thanks to you.
I know. Yeah. But they still make a great race car, and compare what it costs to build a really serious high-end race car for fun. For a guy that wants to go racing in a good, safe car with a full cage in it, there's not a better class out there. It is just a heck of a lot of fun. So it's great, Well, and the fact that you continue to run the car and run it, where, it's just such a neat.
If somebody wants to race, tell them, come on.
Just bring it, right?
No.
Well, Brian, thank you for bringing the car out and sharing this, your family treasure here with us. And Mr. Brock, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. And this has just been an absolute treat today. So thank you, everyone, for watching. We appreciate it. If you want your car, shop, or collection featured on the show, then shoot us an email at carsshopsandcollections@gmail.com. That's carsshopsandcollections@gmail.com. And thanks for watching, and be sure and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes of Cars, Shops, and Collections.
So
I was just showing Peter my turquoise,
yeah.
Nevada turquoise, my rings, and then
He pulls
the
like
boss.
I collect really early stuff.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah, I've been collecting for about 20, 30 years and have a lot of early stuff.
I love it. This just validated all my turquoise.
Yeah.
So anyone that gives me heat for my turquoise,
It's so beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
Stuff was